You know that constant, low-grade anxiety of trying to be everything to everyone. That persistent feeling of being stretched so thin that you're almost transparent. Your kindness has become a quiet form of self-erasure. Take Sarah, who works overtime not because she loves her job, but because saying no feels like a personal failure. Every extra project, every late-night email, every rescued colleague, they're not acts of generosity. They're survival strategies built on the silent fear that if you stop performing niceness, you'll become invisible. Have you ever wondered, what are you really protecting when you say yes to everything? Because here's the uncomfortable truth: performative kindness isn't compassion. It's a survival mechanism that slowly drains your soul, trading your authentic self for momentary approval. They tell you that being nice means being good, but the truth is that compulsive people-pleasing is a form of self-abandonment. Your endless giving isn't a virtue, it's a desperate attempt to prove your worth by becoming indispensable to others. Have you ever caught yourself saying yes when every fiber of your body screams no? That's fear driving your kindness, a survival strategy born in childhood, where being agreeable meant staying safe. Picture Lisa, always the first to volunteer, always the last to leave. Her childhood taught her that her worth was measured by her usefulness. If she could solve everyone's problems, maybe she'd finally be seen, finally be loved. But underneath that endless helping was a deep terror. If she stopped performing, if she stopped being indispensable, she might become invisible. Your compulsive niceness isn't a character flaw, it's a sophisticated emotional defense mechanism. You've learned that needs are dangerous, that wants invite rejection. So you shape-shift, anticipate, accommodate. You become whatever others need you to be, hoping that somewhere in this constant giving, someone will finally see the real you. But genuine kindness flows from fullness, compulsive niceness flows from fear, and the price, your own quiet disappearance, one yes at a time. The landscape of kindness has a hidden terrain where generosity becomes a form of self-erasure. Consider Lisa, who always volunteered first, answered every late-night text, and planned every family gathering. Her phone was a constant symphony of other people's needs, while her own desires remained on permanent silent mode. What if your niceness is actually a sophisticated disappearing act? You're not just helping, you're systematically removing yourself from your own story. Each time you prioritize others' comfort over your own presence, you're trading your authentic self for a shadow, visible only through the reflection of what everyone else needs. They tell you that being indispensable is a virtue. The truth is, when you become everything to everyone, you become nothing to yourself. Your kindness transforms from a gift into a camouflage, where your identity blends into the background, so transparent that even you struggle to see where you end and others begin. Your kindness has become a currency, a transactional exchange, where your worth is calculated by how much you can do, how available you can be, how completely you can dissolve yourself into someone else's needs. Let's talk about Sarah. She was the friend everyone called at midnight, the colleague who always covered extra shifts, the daughter who managed her entire family's emotional landscape. Her phone was a lifeline for everyone else, but for her, it was a leash, binding her to a version of herself defined entirely by what she could provide. What if your compulsive helping isn't actually about generosity, but about proving your value? Deep down, you've learned to believe that love is something you earn through endless service, not something you inherently deserve. They tell you that being needed equals being loved. But the truth is, when you transform yourself into a human Swiss Army knife, always ready, always functional, you're not building connection. You're constructing an elaborate performance of worthiness. Your kindness isn't genuine when it's a desperate bid for validation. Genuine compassion flows from wholeness, not from a scarcity of self. You can be kind without disappearing. The nicest people have a secret, a volcano of unexpressed anger bubbling just beneath their polite surface. Every unset boundary is a pressure valve waiting to burst. Consider Sarah, who always said yes to her colleagues' requests. Late nights, weekend work, impossible deadlines, she never refused. Then one afternoon, she slammed her laptop shut and screamed into her empty office, shocking even herself with the rage that had been accumulating for years. The resentment you feel isn't about them, it's about the boundaries you never set. Your kindness becomes a silent trap, where every yes chips away at your inner peace. When you consistently prioritize others' comfort over your own needs, you're not being generous. You're performing a slow form of emotional self-destruction. What if your endless accommodations are actually preventing genuine connection? What if the anger you're suppressing is your truest, most honest voice trying to break through the wall of people-pleasing? Genuine kindness flows from fullness, compulsive niceness flows from fear. And that fear, it transforms into a toxic underground river of unexpressed anger, eroding your sense of self with every unspoken no. The Martyr's medal is heavy, and you've been wearing it so long you've forgotten the weight. Every self-sacrificing gesture tells a story. Look how noble I am. Look how much I give. But nobility isn't measured by how much of yourself you erase. Let me tell you about Mark, who spent years believing his worth was calculated by how many people he could rescue. He'd drop everything, cancel plans, miss sleep, drain his own resources, always available, always the hero. Until one day, exhausted and resentful, he realized no one was keeping score of his suffering except him. What if your endless giving isn't compassion, but a desperate performance of value? They tell you that selflessness is the highest virtue, but the truth is genuine kindness doesn't require you to disappear. Authentic compassion flows from a full cup, not a bone-dry well. Your worth isn't determined by how much you can endure, how many burdens you can shoulder, or how many people you can please. You can be kind without disappearing. And sometimes, the most radical act of love is choosing yourself. The belief that love must be earned runs like an invisible thread through your relationships, silently programming every interaction. You've learned to transform yourself into whatever shape the moment demands, bending, shrinking, expanding, hoping someone will finally see you as worthy. Picture her at the dinner party, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that aren't funny, offering to help clear plates before anyone asks, filling every silence with nervous energy. Her worth is calculated in service, in how perfectly she can anticipate and meet everyone else's needs. What if your kindness isn't a gift, but a transaction, a desperate attempt to prove your value by making yourself indispensable? These aren't acts of love, they're survival strategies learned in childhood, where your emotional safety depended on being perfect, pleasing, invisible. They tell you that being needed equals being loved, but the truth is, genuine connection happens when you show up fully, messy, imperfect, unrefined. Your worth isn't something to be earned, it simply exists, independent of how much you do for others. There's a radical act of compassion most people never consider: protecting your own energy. Think about the last time you said yes when every cell in your body was screaming no. Maybe you're picturing helping a friend move, covering an extra shift, or consoling someone while your own heart was quietly breaking. Here's the truth: boundaries aren't walls. They're invitations to more authentic connection. When you learn to say no without guilt, you're not rejecting others, you're actually creating space for genuine, sustainable kindness. Consider Jake, who used to volunteer for every community project. One day, he realized he was showing up exhausted, resentful, and contributing nothing of real value. His yes had become a hollow performance, not true generosity. The moment he started choosing intentional engagement, his contributions became meaningful again. Genuine kindness flows from fullness. Compulsive niceness flows from fear. You can be kind without disappearing. What if your compassion could be a renewable resource instead of a depleted currency? Your boundaries are the blueprint of your most authentic self. They're not selfish, they're self-preservation. Power isn't something that happens to you, it's something you reclaim inch by deliberate inch. There's a profound moment when kind people realize their compassion can be a source of strength, not depletion. Consider Sarah, who used to volunteer for every committee, emergency, and crisis. One evening, she looked at her calendar, filled with everyone else's priorities, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd done something purely for herself. Her kindness had become a prison, not a pathway. What if your giving could actually restore you instead of emptying you? Authentic compassion isn't about saying yes to everything, but about saying yes to yourself first. You can be kind without disappearing. You can support others without sacrificing your own energy, your own dreams, your own essential self. Genuine kindness flows from fullness. Compulsive niceness flows from fear. When you transform giving from a survival strategy to a conscious choice, you're not just setting boundaries, you're declaring your own worth. Your compassion becomes a radical act of self-respect. The stories we tell ourselves about our worth are powerful scripts, invisible blueprints that silently guide every relationship and choice. There's a moment I want you to recognize when you realize your entire relational pattern is built on an inherited narrative of unworthiness. Consider Sarah, who discovered her people-pleasing wasn't kindness, but a desperate performance designed to prove she deserved love. She'd spend hours anticipating others' needs, transforming herself into whatever shape would guarantee acceptance. The cost? Her own quiet, suffocating invisibility. What if your current story of worth isn't actually yours? What if it's a hand-me-down narrative from childhood survival strategies, a script written by fear, not authenticity? They told you that being good meant being silent, that your value was measured by how little space you took up. But the truth is radically different. Your worth isn't something you earn. It's something you recognize. You can be kind without disappearing. You can love without losing yourself. The healing begins when you dare to rewrite your narrative from a place of radical self-acceptance, where compassion flows from wholeness, not desperation. The moment you start tracking your emotional patterns, something profound shifts. Consider Lisa, who realized every time her phone rang late at night, her body tensed, not from excitement, but from an automatic people-pleasing reflex. She wasn't answering because she genuinely wanted to help. She was responding from a deep-seated fear of disappointing someone. Emotional literacy isn't about judgment. It's about understanding the hidden currents driving your giving. What if your kindness isn't actually about generosity, but about avoiding conflict? What if those endless acts of helping are really elaborate protection mechanisms, shields constructed from childhood survival strategies? When you learn to watch your emotional responses without shame, you start seeing the intricate dance of your inner landscape. The resentment you feel isn't about them, it's about the boundaries you never set. Genuine kindness flows from fullness, compulsive niceness flows from fear. And the first step toward authentic compassion is simply witnessing your own patterns with radical, tender honesty. There's a subtle alchemy in relationships most people never learn. Notice how you've been designing connections that drain you instead of nourish you, like intricate machines where you're always the fuel, never the engine. What if your relationships could be ecosystems of mutual care, where giving and receiving flow as naturally as breathing? Take Lisa, who spent years being the constant rescuer in her friend group. She'd drop everything to solve everyone's problems, her own needs perpetually invisible. Until one day, she realized her kindness wasn't generosity. It was a sophisticated form of self-abandonment. Transforming connection dynamics isn't about stopping your compassion. It's about reimagining how that compassion circulates. You can be kind without disappearing. You can support others without sacrificing yourself. The radical act is creating relationships where vulnerability is a two-way street, where boundaries aren't walls but bridges. These new connection models require something profound, trusting that you are worthy of receiving, not just giving, that your needs matter as much as the needs you've been frantically trying to meet for everyone else. The most radical act of compassion isn't giving until you're empty. It's creating a sustainable wellspring of care that nourishes both you and others. What if kindness could be a renewable resource, not a finite fuel that burns you out? Consider Sarah, a therapist who spent years pouring herself into every client's crisis, believing her own needs were less important. One day, she realized her compassion had become a form of self-abandonment. She was healing everyone except herself. The compassion revolution isn't about doing less. It's about giving from wholeness, not desperation. You can be kind without disappearing. Genuine kindness flows from fullness. Compulsive niceness flows from fear. When you integrate self-care into your helping behaviors, you transform compassion from a draining transaction into a regenerative practice. This isn't selfishness, it's sustainability. By honoring your own boundaries and energy, you actually become more effective in supporting others. Your compassion becomes deeper, more authentic, when it emerges from a place of genuine abundance rather than depleted obligation. Your kind revolution isn't a destination, it's a daily practice of radical self-respect. Think about the moment you first realize your compassion can be both powerful and protective. There's a quiet strength in understanding that true generosity begins with honoring your own inner landscape. Consider this. Sarah used to apologize for taking up space, always shrinking herself to make others comfortable. One day, she realized her constant yielding wasn't kindness, it was a form of self-abandonment. She decided her compassion would start with herself first. What if your kindness could be a form of personal liberation, not a transaction of giving until you're empty, but a sustainable flow of genuine care that includes you in the equation? You can be kind without disappearing. You can support others without sacrificing yourself. This is your manifesto: compassion with boundaries, connection without depletion, love that starts from a place of wholeness, not desperate need. Your revolution is quiet, powerful, and entirely your own.